Hello everyone, welcome to HRC Connects, our new online community platform created for you, the food, drink, and hospitality industry. My name is Rhonda Ansley. I'm the event manager of Hotel, Restaurant, and Catering Show, one of Montgomery Events' leading trade events. I am delighted to introduce Theo Leslie, Strategy Manager for Airline, Travel, and Hospitality for Worldpay, and he will host today's events. After presenting a few insights, Theo will be joined by Stephen Isaac to answer your questions. So do use the Ask a Question button below and vote for any of the questions that you would most like answered. Theo, over to you.
Thanks, Rhonda. It's nice to see you all, I guess, kind of. I'm going to share my screen now, so fingers crossed this kind of comes off. Here we go. Nice. So, welcome. Thanks for joining. First of all, to introduce myself and a little bit about who I am and I guess why I'm talking to you today. So I'm Theo Leslie. I think in the original email that went out, I was down as Theo Leslie Moses, but I think that was just a typo. Surname's not Moses. Maybe, I kind of had a moment. My father is Jewish, so I thought, oh my God, is this a kind of a calling? But no, just Theo Leslie. So to kind of introduce me and my background, so I started out my career at PwC. So I started working in finance for a few years. Really kind of got under the skin of financial statements and worked with kind of FTSE businesses, reviewing their financial controls and processes. And so I'm a chartered accountant by trade, but please don't switch off. After that, I went to the restaurant group. So I just loved food, cooking. Before I started at PwC, I actually worked as a street food chef over my summer. And I thought, if I really fall in love with this, then I'm going to make this my career and I'm going to stack off going to work for this accounting firm. But actually, it was really, really tough work, standing, cooking in the kitchens all day, in the prep rooms, and then taking it out and serving it all day over the weekends. So it wasn't for me being a chef, although I do still love cooking. I always had it in me that I wanted to go and work in food or hospitality in some way. So I went and worked at the restaurant group after PwC, and I joined their strategy team. Worked across a huge range of things. So in the group strategy stuff, looked at kind of brand reviews, pricing, consumer positioning, really kind of estate planning, larger level stuff. And then also worked in a kind of commercial strategy role in their delivery team, which was really, really exciting. It was all about trialing and testing new virtual brands. And we were basically using, if you know the restaurant group, we've got a kind of national restaurant estate, Frank and Benny's, Chiquito. And we were using those restaurants as a kind of national network of dark kitchens through which to trial and test and learn delivery brands. It was really, really, really exciting because, you'd try something out and then suddenly it would be rolled out nationally across the UK within a matter of weeks. Which was pretty cool. I mean, there's not many kind of restaurant brands that can just do that and switch that on overnight. And these kind of virtual brands, I think they're really pushing the boundaries of what exists. If you're not familiar with them, they're basically brands that exist only online, so only on Deliveroo, Just Eats or Uber Eats. And you've got tremendous power with them to start really tailoring the proposition, the price point, the brand messaging and positioning, even to regions in the country. And we were really pushing the boundaries of that. So it was very, very exciting. But a year ago, weirdly, just before COVID hit, I accepted an offer to come and join Worldpay as a kind of strategy manager, initially focusing on hospitality, although my remit's slightly broadened over the last 6 months or so. And really kind of looking at what does technology look like in the hospitality sector? And, what are Worldpay doing and how can we start pushing the boundaries over kind of really bringing that to life? So the changing face of hospitality. So over the last year, of course, you all know operators across hospitality, hotels, restaurants, stadia, leisure, have just had to rapidly pivot to keep up with change. there's this whole kind of concept, I think, that existed when everything shut of, oh God, we've got this fixed cost site. How do we sweat this asset as much as possible? Because even if we're getting rent breaks or rent reductions from our landlords, we still need to make this business kind of at least somewhat revenue generating. And so huge growth across loads and loads of different revenue streams in the virtual space and also in the physical space. So obviously delivery and click and collect has exploded, enormous significant uplifts, just staggering figures posted by these delivery aggregators over the type of revenue that they're pulling in. Transitioning to retail, both online and on-site, so restaurants and hospitality businesses alike, starting to think about, okay, we've got this site and no one can come and eat in it. What can we do instead? Loads of independent cafes and restaurants converting themselves into kind of essential goods retail shops. And you still see that even after some reopening, you still see that kind of separate strand of the business existing today. A huge boom in cook-at-home meals. I thought this was really, really interesting. I think it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out as well, because I think cook-at-home meals were always things, obviously all restaurants and operators knew about them, many of them were doing them before. I think the lockdown's given a lot of people the time and space to start thinking about how can we really perfect that experience and how do we deliver it in a really effective way, in a really good quality way for the customer. And now that restaurants and businesses have had that time and they've got good propositions out there, you feel like it's really going to be here to stay in the long term. And you see people doing this from Michelin-star restaurants to high street brands. And finally, supermarket ranges. And obviously, this has actually traditionally kind of been the bolster of a few major brands like Leon or Pizza Express is a classic one. But what will be really interesting to see is kind of actually how that cook-at-home meal concept then transitions into the supermarket and into the kind of high street, and how that kind of, I don't know, how this perfected make-it-yourself-at-home experience can start transitioning to other retailers and not just from direct sale. And of course, the background of this is a massive migration to e-commerce. So we saw a 20% increase in e-commerce volume initially year on year across the kind of 12 months of that lockdown. And we found from our own kind of Power Your Payments report that 69% of online shoppers will feel comfortable buying food delivery. And I thought this was really interesting. I know the kind of increase in e-commerce is an obvious stat, but what I find fascinating about it is historically that increase in e-commerce has been driven by demographical changes. It's been driven by Gen Y, Gen Z kind of growing up, becoming consumers, spending, and just being more comfortable with the technology. Whereas this increase is not driven by that. This increase is actual higher penetration into a new demographic of people, an older demographic of people who maybe weren't doing this before, but have had to take a lot of the restrictions very, very seriously. And it's just interesting because definitely over lockdown, something that I think almost all restaurants and hospitality providers saw was an increase in average order value online, people spending more. And I think part of that definitely was driven by that, you know, increased pent-up spending and you don't have anything else to go out and spend your cash on. But also, I think a lot of it was actually just driven by a more affluent, more established consumer shopping online and starting to think about actually how that shift affects your demographic and the type of people that you're kind of relating with or interacting with as a brand online, I think is really, really interesting. And, you know, why does this matter as well? I mean, in terms of delivery, what we've seen is expansion of zones. So Deliveroo, Uber Eats, Just Eat having to expand their zones, better rider supply, better service across multiple geographies. And then the benefit of additional customer capture in a broadening market. And I think one of the great challenges for operators always with delivery Hi, sorry about that. I'm back. It's back in business. Okay. I've got multiple calls going on in the household, but sadly, I wasn't able to get exclusive Wi-Fi access. So, sorry, our global payments report. So I think definitely the point I was making there anyway is that, you know, delivery, whilst it's been a kind of, I guess, a bit of a mixed blessing, it definitely, over time, I think the power of the merchants will, or the power of operators will shift what that looks like in the modern landscape. So looking at how these trends are really kind of going to embed themselves, I guess, in all businesses, and definitely from a kind of payments perspective, what's really, really interesting is the kind of shift that we've seen in payments. And what's most fascinating is actually that this shift has really accelerated existing trends. So a lot of people ask me, a lot of merchants that I talk to from our business will ask me kind of, you know, what do you expect about the permanence of this? And I mean, definitely we've seen huge spikes in e-commerce and shift to digital wallet transactions. But when you start looking at these stats, I think you do think whilst there will be some correction, there will be a kind of definite permanence in some of the behaviors that we've seen. So digital wallets now at 44.5% of e-commerce transactions, set to rise to over 50%, so 52% by 2024. That's a decline in credit cards and debit cards. And what's really interesting about this one is actually thinking about the different ways in which people are paying with your business now, particularly as you're transitioning to an e-commerce model, making sure that you can support all those methods so that it's just super seamless and easy for people to interact with your brand by any means that they want to, and remove some of that friction on the customer pathway. Our Power Your Payments report found that 35% of shoppers will drop out if their preferred card payment type isn't online. I've actually dropped out of a basket with a supported card payment type because I found it too clunky an interaction to type my stuff in, and the website wasn't that clean, and I just thought, oh, forget it, I'll just shop somewhere else. It's just a different world, the e-commerce world. Like, it's much more fickle, easy to drop in and out of the consumer funnel. It's less driven by a real like customer desire of I'm going to this place or I feel like that kind of food, and much more just like I'm hungry. And it's much easier to switch between brands. And so you need to make sure you've got a strong competitive kind of showing in that digital world. 20.5% of global POS volume was cash, and that was down by 32% from 2019. That's crazy, right? So this exceeds in 2020 what we had originally forecast would be the case in 2023. So it's accelerated that by 3 years. And, you know, again, in terms of the permanence, you look at some Nordic countries like Denmark, Sweden, Norway, they're expected to be almost completely cashless within 5 years. So when you start looking at the rest of Europe and different regions, you really start to think, okay, well, if they're managing as a kind of near cashless society, why shouldn't we be able to? In terms of, you know, what the kind of card not present transactions look like, 50% of restaurant transactions went through a card not present route in lockdown. We actually saw coming out of lockdown, some of our merchants, I won't name, but they were taking 70 to 80% of their transactions not via card. And that was over summer, right? When you had the kind of outdoor dining, the table service indoor, but all going through kind of order and pay at table apps. If I think about, you know, when I took this job 12 months ago, and order and pay at table apps were kind of like a kind of cool thing. You had some big brands like Wetherspoons and stuff, which had rolled it out across their national estates, but not like an omnipresent thing. And now they're just everywhere. And that shift is really, really exciting to see, and it's driving a lot of this. And finally, one for the future, I guess, buy now, pay later continues to gain market share. 2.1% in 2020. It's set to double again to 4.2% by 2024. That's definitely interesting in the kind of hotel space, hotels and stadia, those large ticket purchases. Definitely we're seeing that in markets where, you know, you want to make a larger purchase but want to delay it. I think traditionally older generations have used credit cards, and it appears younger generations are taking that kind of decision at purchase to delay that cost, and rather than use a credit card, use these kind of interest-free buy now, pay later platforms. So it'll be really, really interesting to see how that shifts. Obviously, there's all sorts of interesting stuff going on there in terms of regulation and how do you manage these sorts of things. But it's definitely one that we're watching. We support a bunch of these buy now, pay later schemes, and we definitely see it growing in our transactions. So you've got this big diversification of the way that businesses have been traditionally doing business. And then you've also got a rapid change in the way that people are spending. So you're starting to create a very complex network for your business. I think what's really challenging for many operators is, how does this look in the new world, and when you're actually fully reopened for business? How do you keep it really slick? So in the restaurant space, you've got kiosks that have been rolled out while restaurants have been shut or quieter times. App payments kind of becoming omnipresent, as I mentioned. You've got restaurants that were traditionally only doing table service moving to counter service. You've got restaurants or pubs that were only doing counter service that have moved to table service. So a real blending of all these customer journeys that existed across quick service, full service, fine dining to independence. You've got people really pushing the boundaries on this. So robot service, which I think probably is still a little bit of a gimmick, but maybe one day. Fully automated restaurant experiences. So a couple of these have popped up where just zero contact, all kiosks, apps, and just holes in the wall where you grab your food. Now, I feel like these kind of zero contact experiences, they often kind of make restaurants nervous, because you think, oh my God, I'm going to lose that relationship with the customers. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to provide excellent service. I think that's like an extreme, right? And you really don't need to think about technology as eroding customer service. You can have it really kind of making customer service magical. I was fortunate enough over summer, I went to a Michelin star restaurant in Spain because they had just reopened, and usually you have to book like a year in advance. But I thought, I'll be cheeky and I'll email them and see if I can get a table, because I bet they've had loads of cancellations. And they managed to give myself and Emma, my partner, a table there. And what was amazing was we sat down, and they had these stones that they'd taken from a local beach, and they'd laser etched a QR code into the top of the stone, and you just scanned it with your phone, and then it brought up the menu. They hadn't integrated the payment yet at that point, but it was just interesting to see that actually, you can take technology and QR codes and you can elevate it, and you can make it something that really becomes part of the experience. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got quick service giants like Yum Brands. They acquired TikTok, a kind of conversational commerce software, to enable consumers to kind of order via WhatsApp, pay by Facebook Messenger. And that's definitely another trend that we're seeing in the market. So really interesting to kind of see how technology can really blend with the customer experience and make it really positive. Likewise, in hotels, loads of hotels now embracing contactless check-in and check-out. Loads of different providers that we're seeing popping up, automating everything from booking to room service to your spa and customer service, and even the Hilton hotels rolling out digital room keys, so you don't even need to go to the kind of check-in counter. Again, I think there can be a concern around operators that you're eroding some of the quality or some of the kind of personal touch, but there doesn't need to be a personal touch about standing and queuing and waiting to pay, right? You can create personal touches. You can still have someone welcome you when you come into the hotel. You can still have someone sit you down and offer you a glass of juice while they talk you through how the app works. And that's still like a really nice, seamless experience. And it doesn't need to be something that erodes, the core of what all hospitalities want to do, which is hospitality businesses want to do, which is just deliver a great experience to people. Obviously, with hotels, there are structural challenges. So you have the franchise model of hotels, where you have a brand, and actually they don't operate all these individual hotels. They're just kind of receiving funds for a franchise. And actually breaking down some of those challenges of the merchant of record, where you now have that disaggregated across these apps can be a challenge. But we're starting to talk to providers in the market who are looking at bringing those separate merchant of records all into one and are willing to act as that individual merchant of record, both at a brand level, but also kind of for just like maybe countrywide franchises. So really, really interesting to see how those boundaries will start to break down. And we really see that business model and this kind of e-commerce model for hotels as the future of where this market's moving. And, you know, just some of the benefits, you can start having tokenization across the booking process for seamless transactions, incremental authorization as you go throughout your hotel journey without having to sign for everything. You can then start to segment your customer base based on that journey. And I think the only thing that's really, really important to consider is as you start using different providers, start to think about your security across those touch points and making sure what you're doing is super secure. And in sports and leisure, I mean, obviously sports and stadia have been mainly shut or much, much harder hit than any other hospitality and leisure sector. And so in terms of a transformation of the on-trade or like the at-site kind of customer flow, we've not seen it move as much. Maybe when things reopen, we'll see some changes. It'll be interesting to see. But just a huge migration, I guess, initially into that virtual world and starting to understand how that virtual and physical world interact and move forwards for business models will be really, really interesting. You know, definitely in things like cinema, for example, you saw initial tension around producers wanting to move their films directly to streaming platforms. Now some negotiations where there are kind of periods of exclusivity. There are still films like Dune, which is a massive blockbuster film. I love the book. It's a big sci-fi kind of novel. That's coming out in October. It was meant to come out last year, and that's going to go straight to HBO Max at the same time as hitting the cinemas. And that's a huge budget film, right? So it's really interesting to kind of see how this will play out in the future and how cinemas and leisure centres can kind of start to think about establishing themselves across that virtual space as well, to make sure that they stay relevant and connected with customers. And finally, in things like Stadia, it will be really interesting to see whether any of this kind of order and pay app technology starts moving to Stadia to keep it super slick. And in terms of thinking about then all these different new customer journeys that are kind of coming and moving and changing, all these new suppliers and all these new payment methods and these shifts in the way that people can and will want to pay online, I think it's really, really important that despite all these fragmented interactions, we deliver a really unified customer journey. And something that can definitely deliver that is starting to think about your payments as that first point of contact with the customer and bringing it together. So things like tokenization. So, you know, we've got, for example, tokenization now that straddles on-trade card payments and off-trade e-commerce payments. That is so powerful. You can start to understand, you know, over the last year, what type of customers have you attracted? You know, does your online customer come and shop in store? If not, why? What does the profitability structure look like of your online versus your offline customers? For estate planning, if you put two different brands, if you're a multi-brand operator, you put two different brands next to each other, or a franchisee and you kind of want to open hotels nearby, what does your card cannibalization look like? You know, how much are you just taking customer base off your existing customers? Really, really interesting stuff. I mean, tokenization, it was actually originally made as a security thing because it means that you don't have to store cardholder data, which I think is really important, and it will help protect against breaches that you see, you know, in the news all the time. It drags brands through the mud. But I think what's actually so exciting is how you can then start, when you create a single token for each person's account, no matter whether they're paying on their Apple Wallet, on their phone, on their card, starting to actually think, okay, how can we start to use this to understand our customers better, particularly if we've now penetrated into a new type of digital shopper. And it's really, really exciting. I think it's just so important with all this change, that you're really setting solid foundations for the future. It seems to me that now all these new revenue streams exist, people aren't going to want to just switch them off straight away. And actually making sure that you've got a really solid foundation now, and you don't have smattered suppliers and making all these manual reconciliations and, you know, trying to do all this stuff across Excel spreadsheets, and actually starting to automate some of that digital infrastructure is really, really important. So just finally, just to kind of go like, what next for tech in hospitality? So you've created your strong digital infrastructure, you've got all your revenue streams working, you've thought about your customer experience, it's all super seamless. And how can you then take that to the next level? Well, something that I've loved, I've actually broken it into slides rather than playing the video here, but it's these Amazon Fresh stores in the UK. So you just scan your app, you walk in, grab what you want, walk out, you put your phone away, everything's automatically added to your Amazon account. It charges your preferred payment method, and then it just emails you the receipt. No tills, no checkout queues. So how can this translate to your business, right? How does this look like in a quick service? Is it a grab and go where you don't have to go to the till? Is it a hotel resort where you don't even have to transact? You just book on your phone, and then from that point, everything you do when you grab a towel, when you pick up a cocktail at the bar, it just follows you around, and you're just in this completely contained environment where all you do is indulge yourself. What a wonderful idea. Or a Stadia that just lets you walk in. You don't have to kind of dig your card out of your pocket and scan it on the thing and push through those gates. Just lets you walk in and grab a beer at half time. So how much more will people consume if they don't have to queue for 12 minutes and then drink a pint in a 15-minute break before they go out onto the stand, right? Really, really exciting stuff. I think you can really achieve that by laying the solid foundations now. So yeah, that brings me to the end of my presentation. Let's have a conversation. theo.leslie@fisglobal.com. Feel free to drop me an email, not Moses, but yeah, reach out and let's chat. So I think now we should go to a Q&A.
Hi, Theo, can you hear me?
I can, Steve, hi.
Hi.
So I think Rhonda will be joining shortly because Rhonda's got access to this is a kind of sub-platform, and Rhonda's got access to the question platform and can ping us those across. But maybe there are some tech issues. So I guess before Rhonda joins, Steve, I mean, in terms of, I guess what we've gone, here we go, here's Rhonda. I'll let you jump on, Rhonda, before I was just going to
slow on that.
I thought, why not? But here you are.
No, thanks again. That was really interesting, and we do have some questions for you. So just to kick off, you were talking about Stadia, and you were talking about kind of outdoor environments. Is that just Stadia, or is it something like theme parks? You know, how does that translate?
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question. I think theme parks are definitely a really, really, really interesting kind of hospitality experience, right? Because it just straddles everything. Again, it's that kind of like enclosed environment of pure indulgence and fun. And, you know, you've got the stalls there where you can go and kind of chuck things down. You've got the rides, you've got quick access passes and regular access passes. You've got food and beverage. So it really kind of exists across that whole spectrum. And I think starting to think about bringing that whole kind of experience together with this technology will be really, really probably one of the most powerful customer use cases. But obviously, again, it's one of the most challenging because it's so disparate across so many different providers, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know, Steve, what have you seen? I know we work with a couple of Stadia, don't we?
Yeah, no, I mean, we've seen the move to cashless accelerate, to be honest, over the pandemic, and now that people are reopening. We initially saw it with the rugby football union at Twickenham, where they reduced their levels of fraud and also time taken to reconcile an event down to a matter of hours. I think it was last Rugby World Cup they hosted, so quite a long time ago. But we're now beginning to see that go into other football stadia, cricket arenas, and even the sort of horse racing events where perhaps they resisted going cashless because of cash being used for within the gambling side of the business. But we had a customer open yesterday at Redcar. And they have gone cashless for that reopening. It was a pilot event, but they've rolled out mobile POS on the PAX terminals. They have QR-based apps for order to table, click and collect, and like Theo sort of has talked about with the hotel sector, that they are considering in the future maybe moving to use QR codes issued with tickets perhaps, or hosted on an app, so that they can have that digital pass to use throughout the day as they buy drinks or food or other merchandise, to make it completely frictionless, as frictionless as possible.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the NFC technology that they use in like cards to pay is the same technology that they currently use in Stadia for access. So it's actually it's all the same technology. It's just about making sure that you're kind of programming the right infrastructure around it. Yeah. So it's already pretty close to it becoming a reality.
Yeah. Well, you said that a lot of companies or a lot of venues are switching to this. Do you think this is a permanent thing? This is the wave of the future, or do you think this is something that is kind of COVID related and will go back to business as usual once this is hopefully all died down?
I mean, from my point of view, and looking at our customers, I mean, apps have been around for a while. I think, Young's, Wetherspoons in the pub sector, Wagamama and Oaxaca were early adopters in the sort of fast casual restaurant space. But they had sort of mixed success. You had to have an app downloaded for every single one, which puts some people off. But over COVID, every single large chain and even the smaller ones have rolled out an app for delivery, increasingly click and collect, and now as they're reopening, pay at table. Customer not present. We're seeing probably 30 to 40% of transactions in some pub groups going through the app. We're seeing up to 75, 80% in some restaurants where they're trying to make it mandatory to use that app at the moment, although, they don't want to lose business, so they are a bit flexible on that. But there are trends. I mean, customers have begun to review those channels and optimize them, looking at introducing richer functionality such as loyalty. They're coming to talk to us about moving the gateway back to the main card processor, which is us, their payments partner, because they're paying a lot more. That it's costing them a lot more with those increased volumes to process through perhaps a smaller gateway company that the app was already integrated with. And they want to start talking about omnichannel and maximizing their e-commerce efficiency, basically. So there's lots of discussions going on.
In your opinion, how far along do you think these merchants are in this journey? I mean, there's always going to be the early adopters, of course, but then you kind of get to the middle. Where are we at in that? Where are we in the hype cycle?
Yeah, I mean, I think Steve really hit the nail on the head there when he was talking about a lot of people have kind of rapidly moved to these new technologies. I mean, they're not new in the sense that they were existing, but they've had to rapidly kind of adopt them. I think at this point, there's definitely a kind of a time of consolidation in a way. So now there's all these kind of random suppliers for these small technologies. People are kind of taking a step back and going, okay, we had to move really quickly. How can we now set the foundation and the basis for something that will then kind of move forwards? And that's kind of where we're at now. And what I expect to see then over the next 12 months is that kind of consolidation just of those core platforms that we were talking about, so kind of what's here now, the click and collect apps, the retail, starting to bring it all onto not just individual like acquirers and payment facilitators, but also kind of individual like EPOS partners. But actually, that's where I think we are in the cycle. And then over kind of the 12 to 24 month period, I then expect to see a much faster acceleration of this stuff, because people have that technology embedded, they've got it automated, that it's not going to be a hassle to their business, and they can start using it to push the boundaries over what kind of is possible now. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. We've got a question from Nicola. How easy is it to analyze and gain insights from all of this customer data?
Yeah, that's a great question. How easy is it? I think it's you need people with the skills to be able to do it. So working in a strategy manager role, like I know often you can get huge amounts of data and it can be like unusable. Using things like tokenization is very, very usable data. You get one discrete reference across your customers, and then all you really want to do is start to kind of bucket certain customer journeys or customer types in the same way that you would segment a CRM database. And all you need to do there is you need to kind of start creating rules and setting guidelines for yourself and kind of creating hypotheses and testing those. So you might create a hypothesis, which is, I have an online only customer, or I have a mixed customer, and start breaking your database out like that. And then from that, you can start to kind of unpick, I guess, and drill down into more detail. Okay, what does my mixed customer look like? Are they meeting our brand online, or are they meeting our brand in store? I think at the moment, when you start thinking about like tokenization, it really is for a more of an enterprise scale business. It's not going to be for like an individual SMB, because you do need someone, I think, kind of like a dedicated resource to really think about that sort of stuff rather than kind of an owner operator. But yeah, that's my perspective on it.
Do you see that perhaps as maybe a new career path within hospitality? As somebody being kind of a data scientist, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it already exists. If you look at the major enterprise hospitality businesses, you know, we back at the restaurant group, we obviously were a listed restaurant business, but we had a full data science team, strategy teams, you know, focusing on different areas of the business. So yeah, it definitely already exists in major enterprises, and potentially what you'll start to see, like you say, is as this becomes more embedded, it starts shifting down into the kind of what we call the corporate level of sector, which is that kind of, you know, maybe 50 to 100 sites, and then going down again into the kind of SMB level, which is kind of that kind of 10 to 50 sites sort of scale business.
Would you have something to recommend for SMB at this moment that's maybe not quite as a large scale, but would certainly be of help to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think for SMB businesses, you know, it's all about just thinking about laying the bedrock. Always with SMB, you're kind of waiting for corporates to push the boundaries and invest in the technology. And then as that technology is developed, and for a bespoke like enterprise customer, it becomes affordable because it's already off the shelf and you can start to kind of shift that down, right? I think for SMBs, it's really just making sure that with all these like new random customer journeys and different customer touch points, you're really just thinking about getting it all consolidated, making like rationalizing your suppliers as much as possible. So you're not like just chasing loads of different people, and you know, there's no way to stay on top of 8 reconciliations every month, right? It's too much for anyone to do. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I think certainly for an SMB, you know, choosing a supplier that can cover off these bases and join it all up, and you know, is massively powerful and will simplify operations. I've seen some of the major players in the hospitality EPOS marketplace beginning to bundle up their solutions. So you know, you can take their solution for face-to-face and POS, but also they'll bundle in, you know, a table booking system and their pay by app solution, and then everything gets pulled into one place. You can start running those that data analysis and seeing how their customers are interacting with the business.
Great. Heidi's got two questions, and it's a two-part question. So question one, what is the cost of this technology, which is the $64,000 question? And she's also wanting to know, what is the cost per transaction and how many transactions are allowed on the QR code?
Okay, I mean, when it comes to cost, it's quite hard to sort of give an answer on that one. It depends on the size of the business and what solutions are required. What I would say is, although we are seeing increased digital transactions and less cash, so very often that means that cash can be quite expensive to work with and process and have in the business, whereas card transactions can be cheaper in that respect. But also, in the past, we'd have quite a large estate of face-to-face PEDs or terminals, whatever you want to call them, to take card payments. We may see over time, some of these larger venues replacing card terminals because a proportion of those transactions have moved to app, or they will encourage people to use app to keep queues to a minimum, or waiting times to a minimum. So I think there is I think the cost might get spread across the channels. It won't necessarily increase the cost. It'll just get spread and used in different ways. With QR codes, I'm not aware of a limit on the number of transactions, and price per click can vary quite widely on a gateway depending on, again, volumes. So it's generally within under 10 pence a click, but normally a lot less depending on volumes and the average transaction value and various other factors. But we can offer very competitive solutions, put it that way.
So basically, just you need to call somebody.
It's a conversation you should have with your payment partner. It's always best to contact your main payments partner. I mean, there's a lot of new players out in the market. People like Stripe and Braintree, who tend to work with the smaller the SMB book, who have many integrations to a lot of these apps that have kind of blown up over the pandemic. But the disadvantage, if you are doing large volumes of transactions, they tend to be quite expensive, off the peg processing charges, and if you're doing a lot of transactions, the cost can rack up. So do come and talk to your main payment processor and see if you can progress an integration with your app of choice, or talk to them about the apps they would recommend.
Fantastic. I don't think we have any other questions. So I want to thank Theo and Stephen for their time and insight today. This has been quite a hot topic. I think a lot of people are very interested in this, and I'm sure the audience has taken some great takeaways. We hope everybody enjoyed this session. We do record all of our sessions, so if you want to rewatch this, or if you want to send it to a colleague, you can find that on demand on HRC's Connect. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon.
Yes, great. Thanks for watching. See you. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.